Good afternoon. Would you please rise in body or in spirit to honor the family? Please be seated. This afternoon, we gather to begin the work of mourning. There are some who will tell you that a funeral or memorial service is the capstone of the grieving process. That in saying goodbye in a formal way, with loved ones present, with music, with words of remembrance and words of loss, that there is some kind of closure and life can go on. And I want to say to you right from the start, that just isn't true. No single ritual can bring closure, especially when death is so sudden, especially when a young person dies, especially when a child dies before their parent. It may be that closure, as we like to talk about it in our Western society, isn't possible at all. The wound never heals entirely, but it may become an ache that we learn to live with, that flares up and recedes each time, becoming a little less painful, and yet remaining tender. This time last week, Nick was still with us. His death was very recent. For those who loved him dearly, the wound is still incredibly fresh. And so all who are here mourning with us today, those here in the building and those watching at home, you'll be in different places in response to this tragedy. Some of you are likely still in shock and may not be feeling much at all. And that is okay. Some of you are in a place of guilt and doubt and wondering if you did enough for Nick, if you said all you wanted to say and needed to say, if you could have said or done something differently. And that is okay. Some of you may find yourself smiling as you are reminded of happier times. You might even find yourself laughing at an unexpected moment as you recall memories of joy and moments of silliness. And that is okay. Some of you are heartsick and so overcome with sadness that it feels like your heart might actually break. And that is okay. Some of you have already swum through that ocean of salty tears and made your way to a small island of peace where you are able to rest. And that is okay. And some of you don't even know how to feel, aren't sure what you feel. And that's okay too. There is nothing right, there is nothing good about a life that is taken too soon. Not everything must have a meaning, and in the end, there may be no purpose behind tragedy. But your response to that tragedy, whatever it is that you are feeling today or not yet able to feel, it's okay. We are here this afternoon to mourn and remember. To remember and celebrate the life of a young man who loved and was loved, who followed his own path, who didn't shy away from adventure. We remember a young man who saw the world through his own unique, complex, perhaps kaleidoscopic lens. Today we remember Nick Ward's gifts, his talents, his adventures, his challenges overcome, the kindness he offered to people and to animals, the art he made, the good things he did. But if we are to remember a person in their wholeness, we must remember not just the points of light, but the places of darkness too. We can't tell Nick's story without acknowledging that he was a person who lived with a disability, with mental illness. It was a part of who he was. And it would be wrong to equate a person with their illness, but it would also be wrong to deny it. The National Alliance on Mental Illness tells us that as many as 1 in 20 adults in the United States experience serious mental illness, and the pandemic has only made this worse. What that means is that in this sacred space this afternoon, there are multiple individuals who are living with mental illness, either their own or that of a loved one. So if there is a message in our service today, it is this: be kind. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. And please don't equate kindness with niceness. The world needs so much more than that. The world needs your fierce love. And know that you are not alone.
I'm Scott Harvey, a friend of the family and a member of this church. As Reverend Diana said, we have come together this afternoon to share our loss in the wake of Nick's death. I mourn his death. I mourn it for a million reasons. All of us mourn this loss. But we also remember Nick's loving nature and his many talents. For instance, Nick's drawings were spectacular, and he created emotionally rich art for beloved family members. The kinds of creations that you might see on Antiques Roadshow in 20 years. Not quite antique, but artistic and thoughtful. How thoughtful? I mean, anybody that acquires stuffed toys, takes them apart, and inserts squeakers into them so that his dog has something to play with, has taken thoughtfulness to the next level. Nick was a loving child who liked to bond with some of the older kids here at church, and I remember, my gosh, ever since speaking with Terry and Brooke the other day, memories have just been appearing out of nowhere. In Daniel Hall, in the church school wing, and every time I looked at Nick, he smiled back. And he loved to play. Whether it was donning an Easter bunny suit or decorating a pumpkin at Robbers Cave, Nick created beauty and fun. At our annual church retreat, we always had a pumpkin decorating contest for the kids. One year, Nick was about 10, and he painted a pumpkin green, and then he attached a cup to the pumpkin, and then stuck matches out of the cup because, of course, it was a fire-breathing dragon. And, of course, Nick lit the matches. What Terry reminded me that caused an amendment to the rules of that contest. Nick's first job was at Frontier City, the amusement park here in Oklahoma City. One time he got lost on the way home and ended up on the turnpike about 20 miles away. Now, in case you're not familiar with this area, we are surrounded by turnpikes, so it's a mistake that many of us can relate to. Nick became interested in genealogy and made a notebook going back to 1700. He was an award-winning drummer and was intrigued by Joseph Campbell. So he was obviously a seeker, a searcher for meaning in his life. Fortunately, he created meaning for us just by being in our lives. Unsurprisingly, Nick loved animals. From pigs to snakes, leopard geckos to hissing cockroaches, Nick adored the web of life, a sensitive and thoughtful young man. I hope that his caring spirit for animals will be something that the rest of us carry with us. Nick was an excellent student. He was part of the debate team, and as you can see in the program, he was also on the sailing team, which is a great thing to do in Oklahoma with our wind, if you can find a lake with enough water in it. He was passionate about the environment. Again, a legacy that I hope will spark action from the rest of us as we tackle climate change going forward without him. Life is complicated. We're all complicated, and so is Nick. Nevertheless, we celebrate the dazzling light of his life, a shining star that experienced undeserved storms, but a star whose light shone brilliantly among us. What shines through the clouds of Nick's life is an image of an adventurous and generous soul who liked to travel and to meet new people, people in Portland, people in the Black Hills of South Dakota, all over the country, and people from other countries, many of whom work at the national parks. I always wanted to do something like Nick did, but I never had the courage to do it. He did. Terry, Brooke, loved ones, this is a painful loss, and we will grieve. But I hope that you'll remember how blessed we have been to know Nick, how blessed we still are that Nick was a part of our lives for almost 36 years. Nick, we will miss your generous nature and your radical thoughtfulness. We'll miss your smile, your curiosity, your artistic flair, and your humor. We will, however, remember your love forever.
Come up to meet you, tell you I'm sorry. You don't know how lovely you are. I had to find you and tell you I need you, tell you I set you apart. Tell me your secrets, ask me your questions. Oh, let's go back to the start. Running in circles, coming up tails, heads on the science apart. Nobody said it was easy. Oh, it's such a shame for us to part. Nobody said it was easy, but no one ever said it would be this hard. Oh, take me back to the start. I was just guessing at numbers and figures, pulling the puzzles apart. Questions of science, science and progress do not speak as loud as my heart. But you tell me you love me, come back and haunt me. Oh, when I run to the start, running in circles, chasing our tails, coming back as we are. Nobody said it was easy. Oh, it's such a shame for us to part. Nobody said it was easy, but no one ever said it would be so hard. I'm going back to the start.
At this point, I know that there are several people who said they'd like to come up and say a few words. I'd like to start with Jamie and Lauren, and you're welcome to come up to the lectern, which is the one over there.
We are Nick's cousins. I'm Jamie, this is Lauren. And we grew up going on trips together, having many play dates and sleepovers, and being involved in nearly every aspect of each other's lives. While the specifics of many of those memories have faded, his presence in them has not. It took us some time to decide what we should talk about today, but it wasn't too hard to decide how to do it. Aunt Terry is known for the acrostic poems she writes on birthday cards. We grew up getting one every year, and now she's carrying on their tradition with our kids. So it felt fitting to use an acrostic to talk about Nick.
N, he was a nature lover. We grew up camping together. There are many stories from those adventures. From waking up soaked by rain, almost lighting a cabin on fire with a bag of Jiffy Pop, to finding myself face to face with a raccoon in the middle of the night after Nick and I bravely declared that we wanted to sleep outside the tent. Spoiler alert, I chickened out and moved into the tent, leaving Nick on his own with the coons. We would go visit our grandparents in Texas and spend long summer days fishing on the lake and driving Oscar the golf cart around the neighborhood. Aunt Terry just told us about a time that he and a friend brought a duck home from the Hafer Park pond. How a couple of kids managed to trap a duck and walk all the way home with it is beyond me. I'm sure he was sorely disappointed when they didn't let him keep it as pet. His love of nature took him on many adventures, including living and working at national parks. He loved to garden and cook with the fresh food he had grown. I was the lucky recipient of some of the squash he grew last summer, and it was enormous. He clearly knew what he was doing.
He was intelligent. He had such a brilliant mind, especially when it came to computers. If the countless hours we spent playing Mario Brothers and Sonic the Hedgehog had anything to do with that, then I'd like to take a little of the credit. He had big ideas and he pursued them. He spent time at Occupy Miami, standing up for what he believed in. He had big dreams of a world where everyone has what they need and gets along. He really wanted to bring people together. Some people have a gift for looking at the world and seeing the complex big picture. Lest you feel envious, it is a burdensome gift. Nick saw the world in that way. At times it was exhilarating to him. At times it was distressing. The intricacy of Nick's mind is an integral part of his legacy, and we celebrate it today.
C, he was creative. He loved music. Aunt Terry and Uncle Ken were brave enough to buy him a drum set when he was young. His love of music continued, and his piano, dobro, and other instruments he had were some of his most prized possessions. He also loved to make people laugh. Whether he was pulling his legs up and stretching them up over his head, or turning his eyelids inside out to elicit a laugh and the occasional gag reflex, he kept us entertained. His art gave us a look inside his mind. The details and intricacies, as well as the themes he repeated throughout different pieces, show us there was probably more going on in his mind than he could have ever expressed with words. We are so thankful to have some of these pieces that we can always treasure.
K, he was kind. He had a love of animals that brought out the gentlest side of him. I remember watching his geckos under their heat lamps when we were kids, thinking it was so cool as they began to shed their skin. He had many dogs and cats that he loved throughout his life. He even managed to talk his parents into having a pet pig. Maybe coming home with that duck was a strategic move after all. His big heart extended to people too, of course. I'll never forget the Christmas that he went all out for Aunt Terry. He made her a coffee mug and found a place to have a beautiful necklace made that incorporated some of Uncle Ken's ashes in it. Just the other day, he invited her to come over for dinner and play board games. He wasn't always able to express his love, but when he did, it was a really special thing. We know he loved his mom and Brooke so much, and our hearts ache for this unimaginable loss. This whole room is filled with people who love Nick and who love both of you. Don't ever forget how surrounded by love you are.
These 4 adjectives certainly don't tell the whole story. Nick was his presence, his sense of adventure, his laugh, his brilliant mind, and so much more. His life with us was too short, but we will hold his memory close and do our part to bring about that more perfect world that he dreamed of.
Good afternoon. Nick was my best friend. We grew up right down the street from each other in the same neighborhood. My twin brother Christian, Nick and I easily made a trio. He was an extension of our own family right from the get-go. And it was a wonderful and joyous childhood growing up, being able to be right down the street from your best friend like that. You know, it was a time before we live in now, calling ahead with phones. I still get giddy with excitement and the nostalgia of what it meant to just walk down the street and ring somebody's doorbell, and to hear that sound and be able to come down, see who was waiting for you, and just be overjoyed that it was Nick, ready to start another adventure with the 3 of us. And that's the way it went. Every summer, we'd run to each other's houses, ring the doorbell to start another adventure, whether that was with the Boy Scouts or waking each other up before swim team, to heckle the neighbors and go to the neighborhood garage sales, and Nick try to fleece everybody out of their hard-earned goods. He did such a great job. And it seems to be a common theme here today as well, making our own homemade fireworks and other trouble that young boys should be getting up to. But you know, it didn't always take a doorbell for Nick. One of my favorite memories, one of our favorite hobbies was to play computer games with each other. This is in the day when you had to be in the same room. So we would have to drag each other's computers to our houses. And these are 20-pound computers with 20-pound monitors. Since I and my twin brother had each other, it was difficult enough for us to carry those down the street in the hot summers. Almost impossible for Nick. But as Nick does, with all his hobbies and what he sets his mind to, he found a way around it. And I don't know where he procured it, but somehow he had this hideous metal shopping cart that he found somewhere. And without fail, and without warning, would come down the street, and I would hear him a mile away, pushing through the Oklahoma heat, that rickety shopping cart full of keyboards and monitors and wires, just for our adventure that day, into that night. As we did most things together, ring each other's doorbells and our adventures, there was one activity that for whatever reason of schedules not aligning, that I didn't participate with Nick, but I did witness because we spent so much time together. That was an activity, a program called Odyssey of the Mind. Odyssey of the Mind was an enrichment program for gifted children, working on engineering, projects, puzzles, logical puzzles, that sort of thing. And I remember ringing that doorbell and walking into Nick's living room, and his latest project was to take about 8 ounces of balsa wood and hold up a 4.5-pound brick. And of course, I got after him and said, Nick, this is just your latest harebrained idea. There's no way you're going to hold up a 4.5-pound brick with 8 ounces of balsa wood. And of course, 3 days later, when I rang that doorbell and came in, there was a freestanding balsa wood structure holding a 15-pound bowling ball in the middle of Nick's house. You know, that was a group of very gifted and brilliant children, the smartest children in Edmond, I have no doubt. Among them, degrees from Harvard, Princeton, etc. I bring that up only to say that I never had a doubt in my mind that Nick was the smartest mind in that room. Most likely, he was the smartest mind in every room he ever walked into. But our minds are an odyssey, and I've always had trouble talking about our emotions, about our souls, about our minds. There's things that make us human. But anything that's human is worth talking about, and my friendship with Nick, which I cherish, helps me in times like these to reflect on that. And I reflect on his odyssey and his journey that he took. And one of the first things I reflect upon is how brave it was and the sincere bravery that took. You know, I think probably many among us always tell ourselves that we're going to give our gifts to the world, put in that sacrifice, make better the next generation perhaps, when we get done with that next degree, when that next life event is over and we have the time to do it. Folks, Nick lived that life. It takes an uncommon amount of sacrifice to take a look at the causes that he believed in, the environment, justice, and really put it all out there to work for people that he doesn't know, to work for his family, to work for his friends. And secondly, I reflect that I'm proud of him for that. I'm proud to know him for doing that, and I'm honored that he did that. He fought for me. He fought for you. He lived for us. And his odyssey and his journey, wherever it took him, I am sincere to have been a part of it, and I hope that he sincerely was overjoyed that I was part of his. And now I would like to just end where I began, with something that is easier for me to say, partly because of my relationship with Nick and what that means. And that thing is just the importance, the joy, and the wonderfulness of boyhood friendship and what that means. And that, Nick, you are my first friend. You are my friend. And you always shall be my friend. And someday, I hope our odysseys and our journeys cross again, and I get to ring your doorbell soon. Thank you, old friend.
Once upon a time, about 40 years ago, Terry Ward, Karen Jackson, and I met and began a friendship that supported us through numerous shared experiences, including teaching in elementary school, master's degrees, marriages, infertility, followed pretty quickly by fertility, and finally, babies. Nick was our first baby, and what a baby he was. The cutest button nose, huge brown eyes, and chubby legs. Well, actually, every bit of him was chubby. Babies. With this success, clearly we needed to move on. So we made more babies. Babies became the focus of the next several years. We added 5 more. We quit teaching, and gradually a play group was formed. It included Terry's sister, Kathy, and Karen's sister, another Kathy, and their babies. The play group quickly became a wiggly mass of toddler chaos, but we loved it. As it does, life intruded, I moved away, and all the toddlers grew up and separated. When I returned to Oklahoma City about 6 years ago, I was newly widowed and newly retired from my career as a school librarian. Terry and I met up, caught up, and quickly picked up where we left off. Having an old friend with so many of the same challenges led to many shared adventures, and Nick gamely joined in whenever he was able. Nick, too, returned to Oklahoma City around the same time. He settled into the house in Del City, and his roaming life ended, and a new, smaller life began. This is the adult version of Nick that I knew. He had a small house, a modest income, and a mostly walkable existence. In his small house, he incubated lots of ideas, concepts, and projects. He filled his house with musical instruments and art supplies. He used his yard to experiment with his ideas about growing his own food. The last great idea I heard about was a thesis that he explained to Terry and I just 2 weeks ago. He determined that he could create a backyard pond system where he could raise tilapia. He calculated that he'd be able to feed 2 dogs with the amount of fish that he could cultivate there. This calculation of the proper dog-to-fish ratio is a trait typical of his paternal family, where the main goal is simple and constant: add more dogs. At the time, it seemed just like another idea that would bog down in the execution. Reflecting on it now, it reminds me of a TED Talk I used with my 5th grade library students. This TED Talk illustrated the concept of sustainable closed-loop system. The waste from a fast food restaurant was used to feed fish that would later be eaten in that same restaurant. Living alone created an opportunity for Nick to have autonomy of thought. His natural inclination was to solve problems and fix things. This is a trait shared by many members of his maternal family. So fixing things or fiddling with ideas became a pastime that occupied his days. His yard was littered with projects or the materials for future projects. When I remember Nick, I will remember the adventures we talked him into, Terry and I. A trip to the local peach orchard, which led us to the perfect Greasy Spoon hamburger and ended with negotiations in a junk store over the acquisition of yet another musical instrument. Nick was always willing to help, even if I had to move. He was not afraid of heavy lifting, and he proved it several times. I will wonder if Nick's sometimes flamboyant ideas, like the fish farming, I had to look this up, that's called pisciculture, maybe these ideas were some version of genius. Del City offered him a very small sphere of operations. In response, he incubated possible solutions, ways to make a small dent in the problems of sustainability on a small planet. I will also wonder if our society could have facilitated a situation where Nick's gifts for art and music and pisciculture could have flowered. Excuse my librarian brain that makes literary connections constantly, but here it is. Emily Dickinson lived a very small life, and it only became smaller as she aged. Now, we are aware of the impact of that small life. We cannot discuss American poetry without including Emily. We've not always known genius when it was contained in a small, quiet life. When I think of Nick, I will think of Emily.
Hi, I'm Ann McDermott. I was briefly Nick's youth advisor. I was also his mother's good friend, and later I was Nick's friend. I'd like to read a poem by Albert Huffstickler, and then I'll have a few other words to say. The Cure. We think we get over things. We don't get over things. Or say, we get over the measles, but not a broken heart. We need to make that distinction. The things that become a part of our experience never become less a part of our experience. How can I say it? The way to get over a life is to die. Short of that, you move with it. Let the pain be the pain, not in the hope that it will vanish, but in the faith that it will fit in. And be then not any less pain, but true to form. Because anything natural has an inherent shape and will flow towards it. And a life is as natural as a leaf. That's what we're looking for. Not the end of a thing, but the shape of it. So what was the shape? What was the shape of Nick's life? Well, we've already heard a lot about Nick's art, Nick's cooking, Nick's love of nature, Nick's love of friends, his always having another idea to pump things up and get things going, his sense of justice, his sense of being one with the world, his love of family and friends. Nick was a lot like a leaf. He fluttered and floated and went from place to place and always learning something, always bringing a new idea or thought to the people that were there. The shape of Nick's life has brought to me is that from now on, I intend to spend a lot of my time and my energy trying to make sure that there is a mental health system that works. There wasn't a system for Nick. He thrived anyway, which was amazing. That's a sheer force. But the system did not work for Nick. What we can do, we can advocate with our voices. We can keep the kindness in our eyes when we look at people that are different than we are. We can make sure there's a softness in our voice when we approach people that need a little bit more understanding. And we can keep the love in our heart, the love that Nick put there, that we can now share with others. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Carmen McBride. I've known Terry and her family for many years through this church. I'd like to share some thoughts or a poem that I wrote thinking about Nick. Spirit boy, spirit man, spirit boy, Run swift with the wind, soar to the moon and back again. Light up our world with your infectious smile and intent gaze, your exquisite artistic creations, handmade gifts treasured and from the heart. Your spirit shines through in all that you do, your resourcefulness in discovering new recipes, planting a garden, seeking new places, tackling head-on what life has in store, of this world and beyond this world. Gone too soon, so loved, forever in our hearts, Spirit Man.
I'm not sure there's a little girl in the whole world who doesn't think that her big brother hung the moon. And it's no different for me. What was different about Nick, though, is that I am certain that he had a direct line to the cosmos. As a kid, I grew up in awe of Nick's brilliant mind. Where I struggled to make sense of things, Nick understood. Where I struggled to succeed, he excelled. I was so frustrated by the fact that I could never quite keep up with him. But that frustration didn't stop me from trying my best to follow his footsteps. As a middle schooler, I took his lead and joined the percussion section in the school band. I took private lessons and practiced for hours to stumble through pieces that he could effortlessly sight read and get perfect scores. The rhythms flowed through him, and his hands played with a steady, focused speed. When Nick was determined to focus on something, he focused his attention fully, and he never missed a beat. A fond memory of Nick that I have from our younger years was his affinity for building intricate models. He would stay in his workshop for hours, gluing tiny pieces together until the project was done and a brand new creation sat in front of him. I never understood his patience or how he made sense of all the tiny parts and how they all fit together to make something larger. The thing about Nick is that he had endless patience for tedious projects and an unyielding curiosity for making sense of all of the tiny parts that fit together to form our larger world. He understood that even the smallest pieces matter in the bigger scheme of things, and that anything worth doing is worth doing carefully. From watching Nick, I learned how to slow down. I learned how to carefully look at everything in front of me and consider why each part is important. I learned that the best way to understand how anything works is to take it apart and then put it back together again. Nick dissected all of life like this. He peeled back the layers, took apart the pieces, studied the mechanics. He could easily put anything back together the way that it was when he started. But the challenge for Nick was always improvement, to build something better than the way he found it. Nick had an unrelenting desire to make this world better than he found it. And it's my belief that in his short time here, he achieved that. Nick was born into a world unprepared for his light, unequipped for his mind, unable to keep up with the trails that he would blaze. And still, he so loved a world that struggled to provide the love he deserved. And he never stopped believing that he could improve it. His heart was that big and that strong and that open to keep fighting for a world that could be better fit for us all. I've learned so much from being Nick's sister, but one lesson that's had the greatest impact in my life is how to have a heart for the whole world and every soul in it. Nick taught me to stay open to everyone I meet, to see teachers all around me, and to love unconditionally. To this day, some of the richest relationships I have forged are with people who, upon meeting them, I thought, "You are so much like Nick," or "I would love for you to meet my brother." That instinct has never been wrong, and it has connected me to some of the most interesting, thoughtful, wholly surprising people. I think we can all continue Nick's legacy of bettering the world by letting people surprise us, by loving people for exactly who they are, and watching how that love has the power to transform. I have been transformed by Nick's love and forever changed by his boundary-pushing perspectives. Growing up, I chased after Nick, but one of the greatest joys of my adult life has been in finally starting to catch up to him. To be able to hold my own in our conversations that explored the cosmos and traced the threads that weave together all of creation. To go out into the world on my own and bring back my own understanding, formed from the foundation of the lessons that I learned from him, and to show him that I had been paying attention. Every so often, I was even able to teach him a thing or two that I had learned. As siblings, we knew just how to push each other's buttons. As students in life, it broke our hearts to cause harm to one another. And we did our best as we grew up to always treat each other better. We learned our own language for the world and held tight to our mutual understandings. We loved to joke and laugh, and together, we became scientists, dissecting the world and each other, our beliefs and experiences. The trajectory of our conversations traversed vast expanses. I will keep looking for Nick everywhere I go, seeking out beautiful minds and big, open hearts. I will remember that sometimes the most radical love looks like offering it to someone who we might not think deserves it. Because each part is important. Every tiny piece of our world is connected to the collective whole. And unconditional love is transformative. I invite each of you to do the same. Look for Nick everywhere you go, and love the world like he did. I'll leave you with these words from one of my favorite poets, Andrea Gibson. A difficult life is not less worth living than a gentle one. Joy is simply easier to carry than sorrow. and your heart could lift a city from all the years you've spent holding what's been nearly impossible to hold. Right now, the world needs those who know how to do that. Those who could find a tunnel that has no light at the end of it and hold it up like a telescope to see the darkness contains many truths that could bring the light to its knees. Grief astronomer, adjust the lens. Look close. Tell us what you see.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul.
Would you please join me in the Litany of Remembrance, which is printed in your order of service? And the italicized words that I'll ask you to say aloud are, "We remember them." At the rising sun and at its going down, we remember them. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, at the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, at the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, at the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, when we have decisions that are difficult to make, when we have joy we crave to share, when we have achievements that are based on theirs. For as long as we live, they too will live, for they are a part of us now.
Please join me in the spirit of meditation or prayer. Eternal Spirit, we come here today before the inexplicable mysteries of life and death, of joy and sorrow. Help us as we mourn Nick's death, beloved son, brother, family member, friend. Thanksgiving wells up within us that our lives were touched by someone with such a generous and thoughtful nature as Nick Ward. We give thanks for his adventurous soul, his warm smile, and incredibly bright mind. We rejoice that Nick was a part of our lives and pray that now and in the days to come, we may be blessed by his memory as we have been blessed by his life. Goodbye, Nick. We love you very much, and we will miss you, but we will always feel your loving presence. Amen.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living a life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
In just a moment, I will invite the family to recess and go into Daniel Hall and get what you need, and then go out to the courtyard. And for everyone else, I will ask you to wait here until the postlude is over. Give the family a little time to settle in. And then there are refreshments in Daniel Hall, which is the room just as you go out these doors, right to your right. You're welcome to get some food, get some drinks, and then go outside to our lovely courtyard. The family will be there to meet you there, and it's a beautiful day. I wanted to leave you with a benediction today that does honor to the Spirit we've talked about this afternoon. Spirit of brilliance and light, of sparkle, of insight, of creativity, of kindness. This is called Benedicto by the writer Edward Abbey. And now may your trails be crooked, winding, lonesome, dangerous, leading to the most amazing view. May your rivers flow without end, meandering through pastoral valleys, tinkling with bells, past temples and castles and poets' towers, into a dark primeval forest where tigers belch and monkeys howl, through miasmal and mysterious swamps and down into a desert of red rock, blue mesas, domes and pinnacles and grottos of endless stone, and down again into a deep, vast, ancient, unknown chasm where bars of sunlight blaze on profiled cliffs, where deer walk across the white sand beaches, where storms come and go, as lightning clangs upon the high crags, where something strange and more beautiful and more full of wonder than your deepest dreams waits for you, beyond that next turning of the canyon walls. So may it be.